and kick it off. Well, thanks everyone for sticking it out. This is the final session, webinar session of this Delaware Tree Stewards. So hope you're learning a lot and having a decent time anyways. This will be actually a shorter session, so it won't even be an hour, and you'll be out and enjoying the rest of your evening. Just stop this video here so I can focus. Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about planting plans, events, and resources. So essentially this session, we're bringing it all together. Okay. All your knowledge, everything that you've done, we're bringing it together to create a plan for a tree planting. Okay. Hold on. And this always happens every start. There we go. Okay, so remember we covered how a tree works, how it grows, how to match a tree with the site, proper ways to plant and take care of that tree once you have everything matched. Now we're going to kind of bring it together with the plans. I will remind you there'll be that hands-on maintenance day. There's the location again in Seaford. Great city of Seaford, Delaware, and Sussex. So there's the details. We'll come back to that at the end as well. So what we started to learn, in the site assessment and matching the trees is what we're really trying to do is you're trying to take your site, you're trying to match the right tree that's going to grow there. So you might hear this a lot, right tree in the right place. But I would add to this Venn diagram for kind of that perfect tree planting to add in this too. So last week we talked about proper ways to plant and take care of a tree. So I'd add that in to get a successful tree planting project is right tree, the right place, planted the right way. And the last thing we did kind of mention but didn't cover a lot was the right time. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, but there are planting windows of when you should be planting trees and when you shouldn't. So we're in June, July, August, those are starting to get the warmer months of the year. You certainly can plant a tree. It may not survive. You'd have to constantly water it because remember, those roots are kind of in shock. So kind of the best time to plant a tree really is that spring window and that fall window. So any really months besides June, July, August. September, as you start to get into autumn, when things start to cool down, they're very ideal to do it. And you can plant in the fall all the way until the ground freezes. We had really mild winter last year. We were planting in January. It was pretty mild. I don't know if the ground ever froze last year. Same thing with the spring. As soon as the ground thaws and you can get the trees in the ground, that's perfect. You can plant in February if you want. Sometimes they both have their advantages, planting in autumn or planting in the springtime. In the autumn, you can plant them, kind of get them to bed, and they could take advantage of the water that might be coming throughout the winter, things like that. But a lot of times, most tree plantings are in the spring, but either time's a good time to plant. All right, so planting plans, what are they? I mean, they're very simple of what they're doing. You're taking the stuff that you've already learned. You're taking your site assessment. You're taking your tree selection. You're taking your knowledge on how to plant a tree, and you're putting it together in a plan or just a document. Okay, this should just be everything you're thinking about the planting from the site all the way down to maintenance in the years. You're kind of laying out kind of the guide for that tree plan. You're thinking about it beforehand, and you're thinking about it, 10 years down the line as that tree's establishing. So by this time, you already have that information if you go through those templates and you start to do it. Okay. So this is in that Urban Watershed Forestry Manual, Section 3. It's Chapter 3, the basic planting design. So there's a template there to help you kind of put one together. But a planting plan really consists of, mapping, species list, how you're going to lay out the trees, how to plant the trees, equipment lists, site preparation of anything you might need to do to prepare the site, the implementation and maintenance schedule, when you're getting this stuff done, what time of year are you planting? And the last thing is kind of a cost estimate. Essentially, this document, once you fill it out, you should be able to give it to somebody. They should be able to look at it and know exactly what to do, where to do it, get those trees in the ground. You wouldn't even necessarily need to be there. And a lot of times for our reforestation projects, I'm just writing the planting plan and I'm handing them off to a contractor, and then they do the rest. We just kind of monitor it, make sure everything's happening right. But everything's kind of in that plan. We're going to kind of go through one of our plans for a reforestation project, and we're going to tie it into an urban forestry project or suburban forestry type project, something that you might have. So this is one of our projects. A couple years ago, we planted down in St. Mary's County in Maryland here. It was a big reforestation project, but landowner objectives is the first thing. Is really, why are you planting these trees here? What is it about this area that the trees are going in the ground? You may be the landowner, or it might be community land. You're thinking about, you always kind of put down what the objectives of this planting are. Is it something that you're trying to increase privacy in an area? Are you just trying to increase maybe places for birds, wildlife habitat? Is it something you just want it to look nicer? Provide shade. So kind of knocking out those goals, the landowner objectives, is kind of step one. The planting site description, you did that in the site assessment. So what is existing on that land right now? Then the map, on this project, ended up being about 25 acres of forest and 20 acres of meadow that we did, but where are they going to go? So this is an overall map that we had. So, you hand this to a contractor, they know where to put the trees, where to plant the meadow seed. But for you, having that map, and we talked about this a little bit, just knowing what that site looks like, you can hand draw it. That map on the left is like a highfalutin landscaper or landscape architect type map. It could be just something drawn like this, or just a Google map image. This is public land. This is at an elementary school where they're going to plant trees. But on that map, you just kind of lay out where those trees are going to go. So, we did a big box, all trees go in there. We know how they're spaced. But on something like this, you can throw in a diagram, just dots where the trees are going to go. A big bar for maybe a line of trees. You can kind of label that, right on them. That should be included in the planting plan when you flip right to the map. That's kind of the thing. It's really important the day of, so you can kind of focus where you're laying out your trees. And so it could be that, just a bar you're putting in saying, we're going to plant those medium trees, those 1 gallon trees every 15 feet along that area. Or you could just do those dots, a big tree goes here, big tree goes here. You could label it any really way you want, but you should be able to look at the map and know exactly how to lay out your planting, where those trees should be set first. It's giving you the kind of that bird's eye view. Soil description. So this would be the description that you did in your site assessment. Now, this is from Web Soil Survey, which is a USDA program. And it's a very easy program to use. I wouldn't think you'd really need it for an urban suburban planting, just because the soils have been, so engineered in a way that they may not truly match what the soils were at one time. So they've been graded over the years for kind of urban development. But that's what they look like. I pulled up the urban web soil survey on this elementary school field, and you can see that one type is urban land. So that's just how they classified it, or there's some sandy loam on the other side. The next thing is planting method. So we put that in as well. Is how are these trees going to be planted? How are you going to do it? Are you going to plant them with, you're going to dig the holes with shovels yourself? That's one thing you could put in there. It could be, we've had some planting at parks where the ground was pretty hard. We ended up bringing contractors in to dig the holes because it was a volunteer planting. And so got a lot of people from the community out to plant the trees, but we didn't want them digging in that really hard soil, compacted soil. So we had contractors do it. You would put that in a planting plan. Or if the volunteers are going to do it, they're going to do it with shovels. Or, a lot of times people have access to augers. So are the holes going to be pre-drilled? Are you going to do it the day of? Listing that in your planting plan. I think just helps outline what you're going to do. The species list. So you've decided what trees you want to plant. Put them in your planting plan. How many of each, what tree it is. You can get real fancy and put the Latin names as well, but that, that really helps you distinguish some of those trees that have very similar names. Rather than just saying a pine tree, you get into the different types of pines or the different types of oaks from where you want them, because they all have different attributes. So listing that out in numbers. So you may have this for one of your plantings and say it's a total of 24 trees. List them out in the size that you have. Like, the willow oak, well, those are going to be the 7-gallon containers. Once they're listed, it's kind of a little inventory that you have for the day of that planting to make sure, okay, the trees are delivered. I brought the trees. Let's check our list, our planting plan compared to what's here. Okay, you're going to have, this many black gum or this many arrowwood. Just kind of making sure you have your trees listed out, or the trees that you do want. Materials. And this is everything else that you might need for that day of the planting. And so, in our projects, this is down there, we list everything that the contractor is supplying for us. We give them these planting plans months in advance so they can get all the materials together. That's what you're going to kind of do on your own plan, is you come up with a list of what are you going to need for the day of the planting. You don't want to be constantly, running out to Home Depot or something to try to buy this, that, and the other, or some other nursery store type that. Lay it out. So it's kind of what you're doing with your tree species. Make sure you have everything you might need for that day. So, shovels, hammers, mulch, how much mulch you're going to have. It's just kind of that inventory list that you can check with what's actually on that day of the planting. Just helps things go smoother. Site preparation. So we always add that in there. So this comes off your site assessment that you did. It comes from that template, is what's already on the ground there. Do you need to do anything with what's on the ground before you're planting? Okay, so, maybe it is a field or, some common area where it hasn't been mowed and you want to mow it down beforehand. Should list that in there, like this site needs to be mowed down. Or we've had sites where there's been dead trees, and part of the site preparation was, well, take out those dead trees, remove them before you plant. So putting that in your planting plan, it's just another thing you can check off to make sure it's done prior to showing up and realizing, oh, well, those weren't done. And that's happened to us before, where we've showed up, no one's taking care of the dead trees that are already there, and you don't want them coming down on the trees that you're planting. So kind of cleaning the slate there, getting it all ready. You're preparing the site. Terrible. Okay, planting instructions. So hopefully you're going to have some help when you're planting these trees. But you learned in how to properly plant a tree. There are instructions. So I would definitely put that in there. It doesn't have to be this extensive. Just a little diagram, some bullet points of how to properly, let's say, dig the hole twice as wide as the container that it's in. Or if it's like a really compacted soil, 3 times as much. You might write in there, let's say you had those willow oaks that are big. We're going to stake, each willow oak gets 2 stakes. And, list how to do that. So it's kind of that instruction that you have in there. That people can look at. They can read and say, okay, well, the willow oaks get the stakes, and maybe this gets the cage, and all these get something else. So kind of laying out for those what you have, how you want that planted. And then the maintenance, the management practices. So you have everything you want, how you're going to plant it, what's going to happen after it's planted. Okay, so it might be water all trees on the site immediately after planted. Then what's going to happen, you say you plant these in May. Is somebody coming back in June to start to water them? So writing out a maintenance plan of what's going to happen, over that course for those trees to get established. So it's a way to say, remember I said it's like an inch and a half of water over that root zone every week it should have. So that's kind of the maintenance plan, especially for these plantings, is that water's key. You might want to annually check mulch, reapply mulch. So write that kind of in the maintenance, what people should be doing. You can do this monthly, like in this, this is from the tree owner's manual. Remember me talking about it last week. So this is a perfect schedule you could add to your planting plan. It's already a template that's ready for you to use. Go ahead and use it. These are resources that are available to you. You don't have to keep reinventing everything. It's out there, but I would include that in a planting plan. How are you going to take care of those trees, in the next year, for the next couple of years, just to make sure you have that covered. Because the worst thing you want to do is, spend all that time, effort, and money to plant a tree and then walk away and think it's going to be successful. You look at this spring. This is I've never seen a drought like this so early and so long. So we finally did get a little bit of rain, but actually not here in Minneapolis. We haven't gotten it yet. But it's been really, really dry. So this is kind of the early watering that we didn't think we'd have to do. And then the last thing, and this will be useful for when Taryn talks about some of the urban and community forest grant programs, is kind of budgeting things out that you need. So, it's a blank slate. You found a site, you did a site assessment, you want that area to have trees. Okay, what are the costs? These are the true things. How much is it going to cost for the trees? How much is it going to cost for the materials? Based on how many of those things that you have. Let's say I need 20 bags of mulch. Okay, am I using pine bark or hardwood? What are the prices on that? So you're going to lay out a budget for your planting as well. So, Taryn will talk about it, but a lot of times when we're applying for grants, we have to estimate the costs of our plantings, from everything from labor to materials to time to travel, and then you kind of lay that out, and then you have a figure of how much it's going to cost to have a successful project. Even maintenance, we have to factor that in as well. What are those costs? So good estimates of what you think these plantings will cost, and then if you don't have the money, where can you make adjustments? All right, so that's it for planting plans. It's pretty easy. I think once you have the site assessment and matching the trees, it's really easy to take the information and put it together in the plan. I encourage you to use a template though, and that template is available in that urban watershed forestry guide. I keep forgetting the name of that. But there's other templates out there as well for tree planting event or tree plantings. Feel free to use any. Just going to help you organize your planting. So let's talk about planting events. So hopefully, many hands make light work. So, hopefully we can get people together to do that. And that's kind of the point of this program, is what we want. We're out there planting trees, but we want you all to be kind of the tree planting experts, to be able to get other people to come out and participate in it. I mean, there's no more joyous occasion really in our field work than to get people out planting trees, especially in the spring. Because people are just tired in the winter and they want to get outside. So kind of looking at that's a planning of one of my colleagues in Pennsylvania, and it looks like chaos right there. Just people everywhere, but it isn't. Looking at that actually isn't. He has that lined up perfectly. He has all the materials laid out on this particular one because the volunteers that were coming to him were coming throughout the day. So it was one of those things. He had everything done, a good planting plan. People saw what they were going to do. All he had to do was guide them to each section. People could show up to each one of those areas and just start planting trees. All the materials were laid out for him. All the tree species were laid out perfectly where he wanted them on that, because the volunteers were showing up for an hour and then new volunteers would show up. They'd show up throughout the day. So that was a good way to do that one, is to have it already organized, already laid out. Laying out things, that's what's nice about containerized trees. So you see this site here, this is actually well-organized planting as well. You can see where the materials are. People thought ahead when putting together that planting plan, when that site assessment is, where can I put materials? Okay, and they can have this mulch delivered, stakes where they're going to be delivered. And then the trees. Once the trees are there, I find the easiest thing to do is, if you have specific areas where you want them, is lay those trees by the areas that you're going to plant. A lot of times we'll use flags, like little pin flags, and then people can take a tree to a pin flag. But if you're really particular, you only have a certain amount of trees, lay them out. I mean, arrive early, the day before, put the trees exactly where you want them. Then when volunteers show up, they know exactly where the trees are going. All right. I can't emphasize this enough, but always when I start with volunteers, whether they've done this a million times or not, I always go through the proper planting of a tree from start to finish. So I will take them through digging the hole. I mean, it takes a while to do it. And, you know, you might have people get bored with it, especially the know-it-alls. And you can look at that picture and imagine who the know-it-all is there, not looking. But I make them stay, because if you want it done a certain way, it's better to kind of demonstrate that at first, rather than have people going out all over the field and start to planning and you're making corrections like, oh, that's too deep, or that the hole's not wide enough, or you need to straighten that out. If you take them through step by step exactly what you want to do, people respond to that. I think they learn better seeing it done exactly how you want to do it. And then it's just minor adjustments you have to make throughout the day when people are planning. So I do take people through that whole process, from all the way up to, you know, if it needs to be caged, caging it, staking it. So it could take a little bit. But then you end up getting, you know, trees that are planted correctly. That augering. So this is an example of a tree that was pre-dug, or a planting that was pre-dug, which made this one very, very easy to do. But you get what you want then when this is out, because sometimes if you don't do that, things can be chaotic. You know, you have to be ready for things maybe not 100% working out. And this was a planting that we had. It's one of my colleagues, and you know, someone it was a municipality. They decided to pre-auger the holes. They didn't tell Ryan what they were going to do, and he showed up, and those were the holes, and you can see the trees that we were planting in it. So there was a lot of work to do just to fill in the holes so it can hold that tree. Same with that one too, this pre-auger. Augers are great, but you want to make sure it matches the trees that you do have. Mulching, there's many ways to do this. I'm just going to go through some pictures of these plantings and just talk about it a little bit. So this was a very good planting. A little concerning that these trucks are so close to the tree, but it's a way to move mulch around. Easy way to do it than haul bags. You'll notice when you start to do planting, sometimes, you know, you might think people want to do everything. They want to be involved in all of the process from digging the hole to out. But sometimes people take on their own specialty. Okay, someone might just be the mulch person. You know, some people might just not set up to do a lot of bending down their knees to do that. So give people assignments. You know, they can still participate, but they may, you know, have a role of, I'm just going to move mulch around, or I'm going to distribute trees. We had a rural planting in Virginia this year. We had a woman who really wanted to participate. I bet she was in her 90s. She really wanted to do it. And we had her just put bird nets on the shelters. And she was thrilled to be taking part in that, because it was something she could do. It was really valuable for our project. Someone would have to do it. And that was kind of her role for the day. So think about, you know, assigning people tasks if they're more apt to do something like that, rather than be through the whole process. Safety. So on a planting, go over safety protocols. There's a lot of things in there that can break hands and go to cause you to have to go get stitches. So this is a picture we took of some students that were planting some trees for us, but you know, obviously they didn't get the safety talk on that. First of all, there shouldn't be 3 people standing around to pound the stake of one. So luckily no one got hurt, but swinging mallets like that, and that's a rubber mallet, which was effective, but still like that, there shouldn't be that many people in on that. Shovels, just mentioning, get your hands out of there. It's one person digging at a time. And believe it or not, they stake pounders. I don't know if you've ever seen those before, but we use them to pound stakes in pretty quickly. They have 2 handles and big piece of metal, and we get more people kind of injuring themselves on that thing because they try to do it so hard. So demonstrating it, go over safety, and kind of stay on those safety protocols. Just make sure that you have a nice, healthy, injury-free planting. Sometimes weather, you do have to consider, you might have this thing planned out for a while, but often there's really early spring plantings or kind of late fall plantings. There's going to be issues with weather. That last kind of minute snowstorm might roll through, and it might prevent people from coming out, but it kind of changes the condition of digging holes. As long as the ground's not frozen, it's fine to plant in something like this. But you never know, a day of your planting, it could be a torrential downpour, which may not be the greatest for digging holes out there, or if there's lightning. So make considerations for that. Anticipate what the weather's going to be. Don't be afraid to kind of call things off or postpone things if it's not conducive to people being out swinging metal things. Then always remember to take off the tags. I know that these tags, you can see them on the various trees. There's a tree in the back too that's a tag. Is the tree's in the ground, you're getting them staked. Always the last thing people forget to do is take off the tags. There's no need to have this tag on there right now. I'm sure it's indicating that this is the red bud, which is great when you're kind of putting trees out. Obviously, this is telling you it's a red bud a little bit later in the season, but make sure you take those off. You don't want to leave anything on those branches that could eventually girdle those branches or part of the tree. So remove tags, strings, anything like that after you get them in the ground. And then that water, you should have done that in site assessment. Your planting plan is knowing how those trees are going to be watered after the planting and kind of into the future. So, you might just be bringing a bunch of buckets. You might be near a stream, and that's your water source. You can just fill up your buckets and water your plants that way, or it might be a spigot out that way. I might have to bring quite a few buckets type of thing. So inexpensive, but trying to figure out how those trees are going to be watered when you get them in the ground at that time. That's a key thing on these plantings. And that can be someone's role as well. Some people like to water, give that one person the watering thing. And then kind of the last thing I do on planting events, especially with volunteers, is, just having some minor refreshments can go a long way. It's kind of that job well done, kind of gets people going in the morning with just some coffee and donuts or fruits, and then at the end of the day, you can kind of take that time to look what you've done if the people are going to be around, because it is quite an accomplishment when you come to an area to plant, there's nothing, and then you leave a few hours later and you have these trees growing. You have these trees out there, you've changed the landscape. It's kind of a time to reflect and celebrate. So we always try to do that, reward people for coming out, just providing food. People love free, including me, love free food and free coffee, especially. Sometimes, depending on the planting, if it's in your budget, use some kind of sign out there. Depending, where you're getting the funding. Some funders like to have, you put some money towards signs to do it. It kind of makes it show, it shows who contributed to this, who's planting this, and that this is a special kind of a tree planting. You don't always have to have it. We don't have them on that many, but every now and again, we'll have a time that we're working with partners that we can put a sign up to show who is involved. Now, this is key for you all right at that site. And this is something you're doing. It could be at the end of the planting. It could be during the planting. So there's a checkbox. It's in the Urban Watershed Forestry Manual. So just go through the checkbox. This is kind of at the end of the planting. You're going to look at the tree. Are they planted at the correct height? You're going to look at every tree that's planted. Make sure if it is, check. Has the tree shelter been installed properly? If you're using a shelter or a cage, make sure it's on there, it's secure, check. You're going through all your trees and you're making sure that it's done correctly. This is something you can have volunteers do as well. After they plant a tree, they can go through a check sheet to make sure everything is done correctly. But you kind of, as the Delaware tree steward, that's kind of your task. You want to make sure at the end of the day, before you leave, everything was done, because it's very, very easy to make corrections right after it's planted, then wait till next year and try to make a correction or an adjustment. It's not impossible. You can always dig trees up, but it's better to do it right when it's planted. The mulch, has it been put on the 3-3-3? Has it been applied properly? Has the tree been well watered, and flagging been installed to locate the tree? So there's a lot of things. And then this is for the long-term maintenance of the site. So hopefully the trees go in the ground. This is a project that you led. Hopefully you or some volunteers will be back to take a look at these trees. Okay, and you're going to visit them every now and again. Obviously you're going to visit them a lot to water them if they're going to be watered. But then you're going to do an assessment, especially after the first year. So usually in the fall, if we plant in the spring, we'll come back in the fall to do a survival count. We're planting a lot of trees. We planted almost 7,000 on that property. We'll do a survival check to see how many survived that first year. We have a threshold. If it drops below 80% survival, we'll replant. We'll reinforce that with more trees. And you can do that. You can kind of set your own threshold. Like you planted 20 trees. You're hoping they all survive, but there may be an opportunity if 2 trees die, you could put another one in just to keep the numbers up. Evaluate cause of mortality, and then recommend supplemental planning. So most of the time in that first year, if it dies, it doesn't make it. A lot of times it's kind of that lack of water, or it could be, an herbivore that's damaging the tree, like a deer or a beaver, something like that. Determine what it is, make adjustments from that. After that first year, you can prune really anytime. Remember I said in that first year, if the branch is damaged, dead, or diseased, and I know we didn't really go over tree diseases, so I'll kind of leave that off for now, what that can mean. But definitely dead or damaged branches, you can take off at any time in the growth of that tree. It doesn't hurt it. I would wait to prune any kind of vigorous branches or live branches. I'd wait for the second year after those roots start to get established. Just to kind of look for any kind of damage, disease, insect damage. You'll see a lot of times leaves will start to get chewed up. It's a natural thing, but if it's just being, decimated, we might have to make adjustments to it. We had those cicadas, come in a couple of years ago, and they were very detrimental to a lot of our small trees that we planted because they seemed to love those trees to go after, so to kind of lay their eggs. And determine if the shelters need to be adjusted, replaced, or cleared of wasps. So yeah, any kind of adjustment you can do, and there's years to come coming back. That pruning thing, a lot of times there's new trees, especially if there's shelters on them. Wasps love to make nests in there, so kind of evaluating what you can do with that. A lot of times we'll come, the additional weed control is needed. So in a lot of our plantings, invasive plants are an issue. We do mow and we do spot spray around our trees, but sometimes just from surrounding areas, we might have like thistle coming in or some type of invasive plant that we'll have to deal with. Johnson grass is another one, hits our fields. So that may not happen for a couple of years, but when it does, do we have a way to control that, to do it? All right, so you kind of have your planning plan and what's going to happen at your event. So this has been just, obviously a whirlwind of a course, 4 sessions, hour-long each. There's tons of information. Hopefully this kind of just gets you started in your journey here. So I'm going to give you a couple resources, and I'm going to turn it over to Taryn to talk about their programs in Delaware. But the Chesapeake Tree Canopy Network, this is kind of Bay watershed wide, but we have a section in there for the Tree Stewards program. So if you go into that, you just Google it. The Expand Your Tree Canopy, there's a Tree Stewards section. So every state has a Tree Stewards type program. And that's what this grant with the U.S. Forest Service and Delaware Forest Service and Maryland Forest Service did, was to help create these tree steward programs in Maryland and Delaware. There's already one exists in Pennsylvania called the Tree Tenders, and Tree Stewards in Virginia, and Tree Minders in West Virginia. I'm not sure if New York has something. I'm sure they do. But when you go into that, you can select, you can see that Delaware Tree Stewards page. Here we'll update all those resources. I noticed there was a broken link to the Urban Watershed Forestry Manual, but all those resources are within there. We'll update them, we'll add more as needed. But this kind of your page is Delaware Tree Stewards to be able to use and go to and look for more information. This website in general has a ton of information about just urban forestry in general and tree planting. So it's a good resource to it. We do have another website called Forest for the Bay at the Alliance. We're getting ready to revamp it. It's a lot of broken links, but there is a newsletter sign up if you want to do that. We send out a monthly newsletter just about the goings on in forestry and tree planting within the Bay watershed. But in particular, there's something that I think you would enjoy. There's a monthly tree talk by my colleague Ryan. He's very energetic. Young guy, very, very, very smart. Every month he takes one tree in particular and just creates a short video and tells you everything you need to know about that tree. It's really well done, very knowledgeable. But that's a good one. You can sign up for his tree talks, which are on our YouTube channel, which is good. So does anyone have any specific questions about this before I turn it over to Taryn to talk about Delaware's resources?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions come in the chat from earlier. So someone was asking regarding planting, under what conditions would you use planting tubes and when would you use wire cages?
Sure, great question. The tubes would be for smaller trees. What'll happen if you have a tree, like if it starts to get to be like a 2-gallon tree, there's a lot of lateral branches on that. And it's harder to get the shelters on them. Once the lateral branches start to go, you actually can bend them and force them in it, which is fine. The tree will kind of start to self-prune. But you can see these on this page. These are the shelters. So we planted those trees and they didn't have any lateral branches. These were those bare root seedlings. I would say more for your urban and suburban plantings, you're going to use more of those cages. So that's just that gauge wire. You can cut them any size you want, put them on stakes. But if the tree can fit in a shelter, most certainly you can try to get them into one of those.
Great. Another question is asking your opinion of rubber mulch around trees.
I have no experience with rubber mulch. I mean, obviously it lasts long. But I don't have any experience of how good it is. I mean, what I like about the other mulch is that it's adding to the organic layer kind of thing. Because, you know, once that rubber mulch is out there, it's never going to decompose. It's just going to be there, even when the tree's bigger. So I tend to go for something natural, but to be honest, I don't know enough about rubber mulch.
Thanks, Craig. And then there was a comment someone made just stating that they went to a quote unquote tree store to talk about planting, and they didn't ask anything about any planting plan or anything like that. They said they could come out any day in July or August to plant an evergreen. And this person was just commenting saying they'd like to think that these places would ask for a plan, but this one in particular, I guess, didn't.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd be planting an evergreen at that time. I wouldn't plant any tree in July for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the plan really is for you guys to come up with. I mean, it could be something, if you're hiring someone to do it, you could easily hand it off to them and they should be able to take it and use it. I mean, our contractors rely on our plans because they don't know what to do. They want us to tell them what they can do, what they're supposed to do based on our specifications. So I think it's good for you to think about it with your own plantings. It's just a great way to kind of lay it out, to get it in your head, because there's a lot to think about. And just it's a way of kind of laying it out from start to finish of how you're going to get these trees in the ground and taken care of.
And the last question might be a good segue into Delaware Forest Service's section. Someone's just asking who maintains historical records like site assessments, plant lists, maintenance plans, maps, etc. for Forest Service projects.
Very good question. I'll turn that to Taryn. Get you on your
So
first
we
tour.
don't technically have like historical records for Delaware Forest Service projects. Well, like we have like a big trees program. They're not like historical trees. We just kind of measure the biggest trees in Delaware that we're getting in from communities. As far as plantings that have taken place, we do have a GIS program. It's a GIS database where we have all of our grant programs listed out, how they were, how many trees were planted, the community that was planting them. We also go out and re-audit every 2 to 3 years, so we can keep track of the mortality rate for those as well. So we document that also. And then, of course, maps are uploaded. You can upload like PDF files to that database. So everything that's corresponding with that community planting maps, invoices from the community, etc., is uploaded to that specific grant. So that's, those are where our historical records are. However, our grant database just came on board in 2019. So anything previous to that, we have tried to put into the database. We just might be missing some pieces, but we do still have the paper records that we keep for some time. So I hope that answers that question. Any other questions before we move forward?
I guess one person is asking, speaking of GIS, they mentioned DE First Map provides a 2007 DE Forest data set to produce online ArcGIS maps, and they're just wondering if there's a more up-to-date data set available.
Yeah, I believe there's a 2014, and there's also they just flew 2021. So that data should be loaded up there soon, if not already.
Thanks. That's all we have so far.
Okay, great. So thank you, Craig and Jenna. I will go ahead and get started on our program. And of course, I'll leave time at the end for any questions. So my name is Taryn Davidson. I'm the urban forester with the Delaware Forest Service's Urban and Community Forestry program. Within our program, we do have an annual grant program. This annual grant program is open to communities, homeowners associations, and nonprofit groups for planting or inventory projects. It is a competitive grant, and the funding ranges from $500 to $5,000. We do require a 1-to-1 matching component in either cash or in-kind volunteer hours, or both. You can mix and match those. And it is a reimbursement grant. So funds must be put up front from the community or the entity that has received the grant, and then reimbursement is released upon completion of the grant project. Next slide, thank you. We want to work closely with our communities and entities that are applying for our grant. So we do require site visits before submitting an application. Site visits can be scheduled year-round up to 2 weeks prior to the application deadline. Applications are submitted online via a Survey 123 form. It's pretty easy to navigate. It does ask for a few items like the description of the project, number of trees and species, contact information, which would be a board member and or a community member, 2 bids on letterhead from contractors or nurseries, and a map with tree species and planting locations marked. And we ask for this information so that way when our council is reviewing these applications, they are able to see where the plantings are going to take place. They're not the ones doing the site visits, we are. So if they have any questions, we are there to speak for the community. Next slide.
Good. So they could actually submit a planting plan. Correct?
Yes.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to go over the timeline next. So applications are going to open from November 2023 to February 2024. In the past, we have opened the applications in January and closed them in March. But by opening them sooner and closing them sooner, it allows our communities more time to retrieve those bids and actually get a plan in place. And also an extra month to plant in the spring. So instead of the applications closing in March and then us giving out the grant status letters in April, we're going to close the applications in February, give the grant status letters out in March. So you get that whole extra month for a spring planting. Like I said, once all the applications are submitted, they are reviewed by our Urban and Community Forestry Council. They are evaluated on a point system with priority given to first-time applicants, tree cities, and tree-friendly communities. And then this year, we're actually going to be adding in an extra point for those communities with Tree Stewards training certificates. So if any tree stewards are in that community or involved in the planting, they'll get an extra point towards being able to be awarded for the grant. Grant status letters will go out in March this year, like I said, and then communities will have 15 days to register or update their information in the e-supplier portal. So this portal is just an online way to register your community in a W-9 format in our state system. And this is how our the finance department uses the information in the portal to remit reimbursement funds. So once you get that grant status letter, it'll have steps on how to register your community. And then we ask for a few pieces of information just so that we can confirm it with our finance department, make sure they're seeing the same thing, and then we can go ahead and move forward with sending out the memorandum of agreement. And we just like to get this done in the beginning instead of doing it on the back end. That way, once the planting project or inventory project is completed, it's a seamless process to get that reimbursement out to communities. Next slide, please. So after we receive those information, the information from the portal that we ask for, you will enter a signed agreement with the Delaware Forest Service. So we will send out an MOA and checklist for you to review and sign. You'll return it back to us. And then once we sign it, we'll send a copy to you with the go-ahead to proceed with your project. You may not start work on your project until that contract is signed by both parties. We do require a 48-hour notice before the project commences, and this just allows us the option to be present if we are able to get out there, and lets us know that there are planting projects that are starting. No planting can take place between June to August because of the difficulty to get the trees established during those summer months. Next slide, please. After the project is complete, we are to be notified, so that way we can send out the link to complete the grant summary report, also known as closeout documents. In the past, the forms were submitted via email, but this year we have changed it up to have it filled out online. So it's a similar process to the application. It's pretty easy. There's a couple questions and then some areas where you can upload the paid invoice, proof of payment, and an updated map. So the report must be completed with those required documentation. And then once we receive that submission, we get an email letting us know that it has been submitted. We'll review the information. If there's any additional information we need, or you may have missed something, we'll let you know. And then we go out to perform an audit to make sure that the project has taken place and meets the grant requirements. Once that's completed, then we submit it to our finance department for reimbursement, which normally takes up to 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how they are, backed up with other things as well. So that wraps up our annual grant program. We've had that program in place for many years. Each year we have been getting more and more applicants, which is wonderful. We're reaching more communities, which is the goal. To get more trees planted. So this year, spring of 2024, we are actually going to be opening up a new grant, a Tree Stewards mini grant. This grant is going to be open to certified tree stewards to be able to lead planting events in your community. So the funding is going to be for up to $1,000. A site visit will be required just to see the location and provide species and placement recommendations. Being a tree steward, you're going to want to plant, in your community or in a county park or wherever that may be. You will have to, you will be responsible for speaking with the landowner to make sure that it is okay to plant in that area, and obtaining quotes from the nurseries, arranging delivery or pickup, selecting a planting day, and gathering volunteers for that event. So what will happen is once you obtain those invoices or the proposals, you would send them to us. We would go ahead and however much funding you're awarded, we will go ahead and pay for the trees. You will pick them up, and then you can plant them. And then it is to be matched with volunteer hours. So we will provide a volunteer tracking sheet for you to match your hours. And then yeah, and it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to come up with some guidelines similar to our annual grant, but it's not going to be as in depth. And then once those guidelines are posted on our website, we will send out an email to all of the tree stewards that have taken this course, the ones that will be at those events getting certifications. And that way you can visit our website so you can read over the guidelines and the details regarding the application process. We're still unsure at this point the logistics as far as opening and closing the application. But once those are all figured out, we will be sending an email out so you have that information. Next slide. So if you would like additional information about our program or resources we do have some resources for homeowners, resources for communities. We have a tree canopy, kind of like a tree canopy map where you can go on, you can put in your community name, it'll tell you what the current tree canopy percentage is in your community. That's on our website as well. It is right now based off the 2014 imagery. However, with that new 2021 imagery coming on board, hopefully that'll be updated soon, so to give you more of an accurate canopy measure based on now. So you can find that information out at de.gov/Delaware trees. And then if you have any questions for me regarding our program, or if you have any concerns about trees in your community or on your property, we also provide technical assistance. We can come out and take a look. You can email us at the dda-urbanforestry@delaware.gov. And that wraps up our grant programs. Are there any questions?
Jenna, were there any questions in the?
Not yet. Just giving everyone a minute.
It is a lot of information. So you can find everything that I spoke about today, you can find on our website under urban and community forestry, and then it'll say funding opportunities, and that has 2023's guidelines. Everything that I mentioned today is under those guidelines, so you can take a better read of it. And then of course, if you have any questions about it, you can contact me and I'll be more than happy to set up a meeting or a phone conference.
Great. Fantastic. All right, well, if there are no questions, we want to thank you guys for all attending with this. Jenna, again, will send out recordings of all the sessions, but thank you very much, and enjoy the 25th if you can get out to it.
Sorry, we did just get one question, or I got a question. Someone's wondering, Taryn, if the mini grants can be used in state parks.
Yes, so the Tree Stewards grants will be able to, and if you are a member of a state park, you may apply for the annual grant. So I know we've given annual grants to Trap Pond State Park, and also White Clay Creek State Park.
Thanks. A couple other questions regarding the grants. Someone's wondering, how does the matching volunteer hours work?
So for every hour that you work, you get a certain amount based off the volunteer rate. on I actually have it right here, the independent sector. So the volunteer rate right now is $31.80 per hour. So that volunteer rate will basically, once you add everything up, that times your volunteer hours, that 1-to-1 match will go towards the cost of the plants. So say you have $1,000 in cost of plants and your total volunteer hours equals $1,500. You have now matched and actually overmatched your project cost. Was that a good explanation? Sometimes those things get confusing. Okay, thank you. And then the dollar value. Yes, the dollar value right now is $31.80 as of April 19th, 2023. Most of the time, every year around April, it does change. So that's what the rate is at this time. Any other questions?
That is all that I can see.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, if any more come up, feel free to email me. And I will do my best to answer them.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.